How's it going, everybody? Lampini here again today with my first ever off-season video in my NFL series. The 2025 season is coming up and it's really snuck up on us. We are halfway through the 2020s decade. So what I want to do in this video is take a look back at the decade and see which teams have been the most successful, which have been the least successful, and why they were able to be successful, and certain mistakes that franchises made that caused them to be this way. It's very interesting how we are in a completely new era that we were even 5, 6, 7 years ago. The era of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger is over. Like, it feels like we just started, but we're like, Mahomes is on his 8th year. Josh Allen is on his 7th year. Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels. But this is a new era in the 2020s. So we are going to go over which teams have been most successful and which have been the least successful. The way I'm going to be judging this is based on a couple things. Win-loss percentage in the regular season, playoff appearances, playoff wins as well, conference championship appearances, conference championship wins, and the Super Bowl. So for my overall list, the best win percentage isn't automatically going to be the best team on the top 5. And then a team that has more playoff wins, less playoff wins, may supersede one that has a better regular season record. So, starting off with playoff win percentage. So, predictably, the Chiefs and Bills are number 1 and number 2 with their win percentages. They have 78.6 and 73.5% respectively in terms of their win percentage. And then in second, you have followed by the Ravens and Packers, which are both tied at third. And then you have the Eagles at number 5. Surprisingly, a team like the Rams are 10th, which is pretty crazy considering that they made the Super Bowl. But they're number 10th in the regular season record, and that's probably because in 2022 they were 5-12. They had a bad Super Bowl hangover, but they've been able to recover pretty well since then. And then what's even crazier is that the Steelers actually have a higher win-loss percentage than the Rams do, even though they have 6 less playoff wins than the Rams, which we'll go over in another category. And then meanwhile, in the bottom 5, we have the Panthers, Jets, Jags, Giants, and Bears. All makes sense. They've been pretty trash this decade. Interestingly, if you look at the Houston Texans, they're near the bottom of the list as well. But that's kind of to be expected because if you look at it, the Texans had a really, really tough first half of the decade. They started turning it around in 2023. They only had 11 total wins in the 3 years of 2020 and 2022. So no real surprise there that they are at the bottom of the list. So now we look at a bit more of an interesting and more exciting metric, playoff appearances. So again, similar to the regular season, the Chiefs and Bills are 1 and 2 in playoff appearances. They have been to the playoffs all 5 years of the decade. Interestingly enough, though, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have also made the playoffs every single year of this decade, too. So obviously you had 2020 with Tom Brady winning them the Super Bowl, 2021 where they arguably had a better team, losing out to the Rams in the divisional round, and then in 2022 they were in the wild card. They were 8-9, barely made it through. But ever since 2022, the next 2 years they had Baker Mayfield. So that's another good sign of how they've been able to maintain their success. They went from a Hall of Fame quarterback to a Pro Bowl quarterback, and you're going to be successful doing that. Making the playoffs every single year. So then you have some pretty familiar faces making it 4 out of 5 times in the 2020 decade. You have the Los Angeles Rams, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Philadelphia Eagles, Green Bay Packers, and the Baltimore Ravens. So these have been the most consistent teams making the playoffs outside of the aforementioned 3 that I just listed. Not too much of a surprise there when you look at the Eagles, Packers, Ravens. These are all solid teams that are good year in and year out. And then we obviously have our dishonorable mentions. The only 3 teams that have not made the playoffs this decade are the Jets, Panthers, and Falcons. Kind of not that surprising with the Jets and Panthers. They've been god-awful. The Falcons have been in mediocrity hell a little bit. If you look at their record, put it up on the screen here, a lot of 8-win seasons, a lot of 9-win seasons, a lot of 7-win seasons. They really have not recovered since the 2016 season. So maybe Michael Penix will be the answer for them. Who knows? So now we come to a bit more of an interesting metric, playoff wins. So regular season success is all well and good. Playoff appearances are all well and good too. But playoff wins are a really, really good litmus test to see how good a franchise has been because it's the best against the best. If you're able to beat the best teams in the NFL in the playoffs, you're going to be considered one of the best teams in the league. So looking at it right now, obviously, again, we have once again the Chiefs and the Bills. The Chiefs have 13 playoff wins, and the Bills have 7. They're right behind with 7. And then after that, we have a lot of the same stuff. Again, 4 teams tied for 6 playoff wins. We have the San Francisco 49ers, Philadelphia Eagles, Los Angeles Rams, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So again, the Rams and the Buccaneers both had 4 wins in 2020 and 2021. That kind of bolstered them up a bit. But they managed to win 2 more playoff games since then. At number 5, you have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Bengals have only been to the playoffs 2 times this decade, but they made the Super Bowl and the conference championship, allowing them to win 5 playoff games. So that is a very, very interesting metric on that part. And you can even look at it with like the Ravens. The Ravens have made it to the playoffs 4 times, but they've only won 3 playoff games. So, you look at a team that's been very successful in the regular season and making the playoffs like the Ravens, they've only won 3 playoff games. Same goes for the Green Bay Packers. They've been in the playoffs 4 times this decade and have only won 2 playoff games. They only have 2 playoff wins to show for it. Despite the fact that they made the conference championship a couple times this decade, they only have 2 playoff wins. You have 15 teams that have not won a single playoff game this decade. One of them is the Steelers. They have made it to the playoffs 4 out of 5 times this decade, and they have not won a playoff game. Not only that, they have been completely demolished in all of their games, as I put up the stats right up here. So not only did they lose, they lost bad. It's really hitting home the mediocrity hell that the Steelers are in. So we went over a couple metrics like win-loss percentage, playoff appearances, and then playoff wins. But I want to showcase something that's a bit different from all that. Teams that haven't been successful and teams that haven't been terrible either. I want to go over teams that are in mediocrity hell. Yes, there are a lot of teams that are hovering around 6, 7, 8 wins. They're not tanking enough to get a good draft pick to bump themselves up. They don't have a franchise quarterback to really get themselves over the hump. They are in mediocrity hell. So I'm going to go over a couple of those teams right now. 2 teams that I want to start off with the mediocrity hell conversation are the Colts and the Saints. So Andrew Luck retired at the start of the 2019 season. Since then, the Colts have not been able to find their franchise quarterback since then. 2019, they had Jacoby Brissett. 2020, they had Phillip Rivers, who admittedly did well for them. They won 11 games and made the playoffs. After that, they went with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was an unmitigated failure. After Carson Wentz, they went with Matt Ryan, who was 100% washed. You want to talk about Aaron Rodgers being washed or anything like that last year? Watch Matt Ryan in 2023. He was washed. That is the definition of washed. Kirk Cousins last year was washed as well. That's how I would define a washed quarterback. Then in 2023, with the 4th overall pick, they go with Anthony Richardson. He is poised to be their quarterback of the future. An extremely raw, athletic prospect a la Josh Allen. They thought that they had their guy and that he would be like their version of Josh Allen. They've been very, very mid for the most part. And Anthony Richardson has not really been the answer for them. Not only has he not played well, he's shown flashes of athleticism and some incredible plays, but the big thing is twofold. He's not accurate, throws more interceptions than touchdowns, and he can't stay healthy. That is the biggest issue with Anthony Richardson. He has yet to play a full season. He was injured for most of the 2023 season, and 2024 was supposed to be the season where he had his rookie year, his growing pains, all that great stuff. It didn't really happen. He didn't really show much progress, and now they are in a little bit of trouble here because now they have signed Daniel Jones. The Colts quarterback room is Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. That is one of the worst QB rooms in the NFL right now, outside of maybe the Jets and the Browns. Not the Jets, I apologize, because they got Justin Fields. But they're right up there with the Browns. If Daniel Jones ends up taking Anthony Richardson's spot, it's over for him. That's the end of his career. So that's what's going on with the Colts. As for another team that's in mediocrity hell, we're looking at the New Orleans Saints. Another team that has done relatively well in the regular season. In fact, they're actually a perfect 42-42 in the regular season. Perfectly mid, perfectly 500. They do have 1 playoff appearance and 1 playoff win to show for it. So by comparison, they don't seem as bad as some of these other teams. But that was in 2020, Drew Brees' last season. Ever since Drew Brees left, the Saints haven't known what to do with themselves. They signed Derek Carr to be their replacement. And I would say Derek Carr is the best bad quarterback in the NFL. He has all the metrics, all the physical talent that you would expect from a good quarterback. He just can't really put it all together. He has decent stats, but he doesn't win games. And to put it simply, you need to win games to be a good quarterback. Not only that, they're in cap hell as well. They're overpaying a lot of young guys and a lot of old guys as well. The Saints are in big trouble of completely blowing up their franchise. They already didn't do well last year. I want to say they're 4-13, something like that, 4 or 5 win team. Derek Carr is now injured. They have Spencer Rattler. They drafted another quarterback this upcoming draft. But they are in some big trouble. Now that Drew Brees is gone, they're lacking direction, and they run the risk of really tanking and becoming a bottom feeder in the NFL. Now, of course, we cannot forget the Cleveland Browns and the Denver Broncos. These guys deserve a bit of a highlight as well, because these two both had two of the worst trades in NFL history that set their franchise back years. Now, while the Broncos were able to ultimately recover under Sean Payton's leadership, they were able to get Bo Nix. He's really digging in and coaching and building up Bo Nix. Like a lot of other young quarterbacks don't have the fortune of having. They seem to be doing things a bit better. They were going to be one of these teams that didn't make the playoffs this decade, but fortunately they snuck in a wild card appearance in 2024. But saying that, we look at the Browns after that. They're still living under the giant albatross of the Deshaun Watson contract. They're still struggling with that. Their quarterback room is an absolute mess. But saying that, they're 19th in win percentage. They are 44-40, 46.6 win percentage, which isn't great, but there's a lot of teams that are a lot worse than them. Because when you think about it, they actually haven't been that bad this decade. They've made the playoffs twice, and they've won a playoff game. If you remember in 2020, they were pretty close to even making the conference championship. And then in 2023, Joe Flacco led them to a wild card appearance and 11 wins. So they had a talented team. It's just been terrible trades, dysfunction on the higher up level, and they've shot themselves in the foot for the most part. And that's allowed them to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Not from a statistics standpoint, but from a management standpoint. They are probably the most dysfunctional team in the NFL this decade. The Jets will give them a run for their money, but other than that, that's pretty much what they've been. And then, how can we forget the Dallas Cowboys? Now that the Commanders have made the conference championship last year, the Cowboys have the largest conference championship drought in the NFC. We all remember 1994. That is the last year, or 1995, that is the last year the Dallas Cowboys were ever relevant. And ever since then, they've only won a handful of playoff games. They had a pretty good three-season stretch in the middle of this decade where they won 12 games all 3 years. In 2023, for example, they had a 194 point differential. To put that into perspective, that is higher than what the Philadelphia Eagles this last year had, and they won the Super Bowl. And the Cowboys had a higher win-loss, had a better point differential. And then they got spanked by the Packers in the wild card round. They have lost and lost badly. The only playoff win they have is in 2022, where they went up against a very weak Buccaneers team that was 8-9 in Tom Brady's last ever game. And that's the only playoff win they've had. They have looked terrible. And not only have they lost, they've lost in embarrassing fashion. You can't forget the San Francisco 49ers game where time just ran off the clock and they lost. There was bad clock management. So not only have they lost, they've lost in embarrassing ways. And now they were 7-10 last year with a minus 118 point differential. And it's only going to get worse for the Dallas Cowboys. They had a 3-season window in the middle of the decade where they really could have made a lot of noise. When you look at what they did in the regular season, they were dominant, but they couldn't get it done in the playoffs. And this is what I was saying about what makes a good team. Is it regular season success? Partly, but it's also being able to win in the playoffs. And you're going to see that in my final list in the top 5 best teams, how some teams superseded other ones and how playoff success really takes a precedent over regular season success. So now that they have Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach. Dak Prescott's been extended. The Cowboys are going nowhere this season, and as a Commanders fan, I'm really happy to see it. Speaking of conference championship appearances with the Dallas Cowboys, it's now time for us to go over conference championship appearances for all of the teams. 11 teams have made the conference championship so far in the 2020s, and one team obviously stands out amongst the rest. The Kansas City Chiefs are 4-1 in the conference championship. They have made at least the conference championship every year since 2018. That is 7 straight years where they've made the AFC championship. This is the Chiefs' decade, and we're living in it. The only team that's ever come close to that kind of a streak is the New England Patriots in the 2010s when they made the AFC championship 8 straight years. And out of all that, they've made the Super Bowl 4 times. They've only lost the conference championship once in 2021 when the Cincinnati Bengals beat them. So everyone else is going to really pale in comparison to the Kansas City Chiefs. But when we're looking at some of these other ones, the Philadelphia Eagles are 2-0 in AFC championship appearances, which means they've made the Super Bowl twice. So a really impressive showing there by the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams and Buccaneers are both 1-0. Both times they made the conference championship, they went on to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. The Bengals are 1-1. Remember, they went back-to-back to the conference championship. They won one, they lost one. The San Francisco 49ers have made it to the NFC championship 3 times, and they finished 1-2. Now, again, they made the Super Bowl in 2019, which isn't part of the 2020s decade. But you can look at it. The San Francisco 49ers have been remarkably successful in this decade, similarly to the Dallas Cowboys. They just haven't been able to pull the trigger. They made 3 straight conference championships, and then, of course, in 2023, they made the Super Bowl and fell short against the Kansas City Chiefs in overtime. Following that, the Buffalo Bills are 0-2, losing to the Chiefs both times. They're 0-4 against the Chiefs in the playoffs this decade. The Bills have been a remarkably successful team, and they've won playoff games, and they've won big playoff games too. Last year, they beat the Baltimore Ravens, but they can't get past the Chiefs. Quite unfortunate there. And then we have the Commanders, Packers, Lions, and Ravens, which are all 0-1 in the conference championship. They've made one. They haven't made it any further than that. But that's still better than a lot of other teams in the league. Only a third of the NFL has made it to the conference championship so far in the 2020 decade. So from there, now we go into probably the best metric of gauging things, Super Bowl appearances. How many teams have made the Super Bowl? So only 6 teams have made the Super Bowl in the 2020s decade, mainly because there is one team that has really dominated it. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs are 2-2 this decade with Super Bowl appearances. They have made the Super Bowl in this decade, in the 2020s decade. The Chiefs have made the Super Bowl 4 out of 5 years. That is absolutely remarkable. That is stuff that you didn't even see from the San Francisco 49ers in the 80s or even the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 90s, in the 70s rather. The Chiefs are, locking in their own legacy as being one of the greatest dynasties of all time. Outside of the Chiefs, though, the Eagles have made the Super Bowl 2 times in 2022 and 2024. They are 1-1. They got their ring last year. And then you have the Rams and Buccaneers. Similarly, they both won their championships and rode off into the sunset. And then you have the Bengals and the 49ers that are both 0-1 in the Super Bowl. 49ers 0-2 if you count 2019. So that shows you what kind of success some teams have had. You can obviously see that some teams have been more successful than others, and you see a lot of teams coming this close to being successful and coming up short. Teams like the Bills, 49ers, and Ravens all come to mind when you think about teams that have been successful year in and year out, but they haven't been able to get over the hump and make the Super Bowl or win a championship. So that was a nice quick little review of how things have been going with the 2020s decade. Now it comes to the pièce de résistance. I'm going to give you my top 5 most successful teams of the decade and my 5 least successful teams of the decade, with a couple honorable mentions sprinkled in. So, starting off with most successful, number 1 has to be the Chiefs. 13 playoff victories. They've made the conference championship every single year. They're 4-1 in them. They're 2-2 in the Super Bowl. They have 2 Super Bowl rings. They are clearly the best team in this decade so far. I don't think it comes close to anything else. At number 2, I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles have not been the best in terms of playoff appearances or anything like that. For example, the Eagles, they have made 4 playoffs in the decade, and they really only started turning it on in 2022. The reason why they're number 2, they've made it to the Super Bowl 2 times, and they won a ring. So I would say going in, they are still a huge favorite to win it in 2025. They have been nothing short of a powerhouse. They've been very, very strong, well-run team, and they are seeing the fruit of their labors with a lot of good free agent and draft picks. At number 3, we're going to go with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, I think, are going to be seen as the bridesmaid of the decade. They have been living in the Chiefs' shadow pretty much this entire decade, but that shouldn't discount what they've been able to do. They are second in pretty much every single metric in the NFL. They're second in win-loss percentage. They are tied for first in playoff appearances. They are second in playoff wins. Like, they have been, you would say they're the second best team in the NFL, but I went with the Eagles because they've been to the Super Bowl twice. It's pretty simple. That trumps win-loss percentage, and that trumps an extra playoff win. It's going to be very tight. Will the Bills ever get there, and will they ever win a ring? They are Super Bowl contenders every single year, but until we see it, they're always going to be seen as the bridesmaid. At number 4, I'm going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that I did not really expect to see on here. Looking at their stats, you didn't really realize, hey, wait a minute. They've been a pretty darn good team this decade. Again, pretty much in the earlier part of the decade, they've been more successful with Tom Brady in 2020 and 2021. But when you look at it, they've been to 5 straight playoffs. They've been in the playoffs 5 straight years, which is the franchise record. The Buccaneers have never made the playoffs 5 straight years up until this year. They made the Super Bowl, 6 playoff wins, pretty solid. That's tied for third. And they made the playoffs every single year. So looking back at it, it's no wonder why they're on this list. And at number 5, I'm going with the Los Angeles Rams. The reason why I have the Rams on here, they have made it to the playoffs 4 out of 5 years. They've won 6 playoff games. They have a championship. And their success has been very balanced. By that, I mean they made the Super Bowl in 2021. They won the championship. And last year, they won a playoff game and came this close to beating the Super Bowl champions. The Rams are an example of what an okay regular season can mean and what superior coaching can get you in the playoffs more particularly. Sean McVay, I think, is the best coach in the NFC, and you can really see it in the playoffs when they win these playoff games. Like, you look at the juxtaposition of the Ravens, which are a great team, but find themselves one and done in the playoffs a lot. Or the Steelers, you find them one and done in the playoffs a lot. The Rams, they don't do great in the regular season every year, but when they make the playoffs, they show up and they win games. That is with the talent of Matthew Stafford. It was with Aaron Donald, with the talent they have on offense and defense, Puka Nacua, Jared Verse. They're a very talented team, and they're a very well-coached team. They know how to turn it on at the right time, and that's why they get number 5 on this spot for me, is because they have been a remarkable playoff team. So that's why I'm going with the Rams. Some honorable mentions to go over. I have the Baltimore Ravens. They have the 3rd highest win percentage of any team. They are probably one of the best regular season teams this decade. You have Lamar Jackson, who is a 2-time MVP, and frankly should have won MVP last year. 41 touchdowns to 4 interceptions is an incredible stat line that we haven't seen anywhere outside of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the only quarterback that has even sniffed a ratio like that. So this is why the Ravens don't make the list and a team like the Rams do. They're 0-3 in conference championship appearances, the Ravens are, and they have yet to win some really meaningful playoff games. But they've been a phenomenal regular season team. They run up the stat line, and they're an incredible regular season team, and Lamar Jackson lights up the league every single year. Next up, I have the Green Bay Packers, another great regular season team. In this decade, they've bridged Aaron Rodgers moving on to Jordan Love. They were a 13-win team in 2020 and 2021, and they didn't have much to show for it. They won 1 playoff game in 2020, and then not much after that. They have 2 playoff wins in 4 appearances. The Packers are still a very young team, though. with Jordan Love as their quarterback. They have a lot of young receivers. So they may turn the narrative around in the second half of the decade, but they're similar to the Ravens. They have the exact same regular season record as the Ravens as well. They are both 54-30 in the regular season. But again, they need more postseason success to be considered one of the best teams in the top 5. And then we had the San Francisco 49ers. From 2021 to 2023, they had an incredible run. They made the NFC Championship every single year, but they have no championships to show for it. When it all came down to it, they came ever so close, but they simply came up short. And this is a team that, unlike the Packers, seems to be in a bit of trouble maintaining their advantage. They're starting to lose stars. Their stars are getting old. The stars are aging out. Brock Purdy needs to get paid. And he's a good quarterback, but is he going to be worth the contract that he's requesting? A lot of things could happen that could make the 49ers have a downturn in the second half of this decade. Their Super Bowl window was clearly open, but they didn't capitalize on it, and they didn't get a ring. So has their Super Bowl window passed them by? It remains to be seen, but we'll have to wait and see. So now we went over the most successful teams of the decade, and now we get to do the fun part and go over the worst teams of the decade. This one is going to be a bit easier to judge just because it's a lot easier to judge when a team is bad versus when a team is good. Number one, obviously, we have the Carolina Panthers. David Tepper speed ran tanking a franchise in ways that I've never seen since Dan Snyder. They have the worst win-loss percentage. They traded the house for Bryce Young, and it really hasn't shown much for it. Bryce Young started doing well at the second half of the 2024 season, but it seems like his ceiling is nothing more than just a average starter. They traded the house for Bryce Young, an undersized, seemingly average to below average starter that they are stuck developing. At what point did they give up and fully rebuild? I don't know, but they're running with Bryce Young right now, and they have nothing to really show for it. So they are the worst team in the entire NFL, and it's been a quick fall really, and it's been a train wreck that we've all been watching. Speaking of a train wreck, number 2, we have the New York Jets, a team that is probably the worst this century or of the last 20 years. They haven't made the playoffs since 2010. They have the longest playoff drought of any of the 4 major sports leagues in America: basketball, baseball, hockey, and football. The Jets are probably the worst of the worst. We had the Aaron Rodgers fiasco. They drafted Zach Wilson, who fleeced them off of a good throw on his pro day. And again, the Rodgers fiasco, it's no wonder why the Jets have been so bad. They've been this close. They've had good defenses. They've had good talent. Remember, they had the offensive and defensive player of the year in Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner a couple years ago. So it's not like they haven't had success. This is like a Brown situation where their franchise has been so dysfunctional. They haven't been able to capitalize on the talent that they've had, and they just haven't been able to be successful. So I know what it's like to have a dysfunctional franchise. I'm glad we're out of the woods with that. But the Jets need to do something to turn this around. So at number 3, something that you guys probably aren't expecting, I'm going with the Atlanta Falcons for number 3 of worst franchises. They're 25th in win percentage, which there are a lot of teams that are worse. The reason why I went with the Falcons is no playoff appearances through the entire decade. And they have not really shown much promise or really been anything more than a mediocre team. Michael Penix did well, but he hasn't played a full season yet. Is he the answer? Very perplexing decision to go with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, but in hindsight, they might have saved themselves a couple years of rebuilding, getting a quarterback in the draft. So that was a good pick on their part, but they have not looked like any kind of a credible threat. And when you see my honorable mentions, you'll understand why some teams weren't on this list, but they just haven't been credible. They've been average, mediocre to bad, and they've made no runs or shown any real promise. You'll see what I mean with some of these other teams that aren't on the list that have shown promise. So, number 4, I'm going with the Chicago Bears. The Bears have the 5th worst winning percentage. They have 1 playoff appearance with no wins. That playoff appearance was an 8-8 season in 2020, where they got thrashed by the New Orleans Saints. It wasn't really a successful thing. They just kind of sneaked in as a number 7 seed. They went with Mitch Trubisky. Then they went with Justin Fields. Now they're going with Caleb Williams. The Bears cannot develop a quarterback to save their life, and you won't be successful if you don't do that. Another reason why they're this low on the list here is they had a haul. They have been the off-season champions the last couple years, and what do they have to show for it? They have nothing to show for it. It seems like they always have picks on top of picks. They do trades on top of trades to bolster up their team to make an all-in run. And what happens? Nothing. So I don't know how the Bears continue to be this bad despite getting so many resources, but they're still bad, and that's why I have them as the 4th worst team of the decade. And then at number 5, I have the New England Patriots. Who would have thought that the Patriots would be on a list of worst teams? The reason why I have this, they have the 5th worst they have the next lowest win percentage without winning a playoff game. Same as the Falcons. In the 2021 season, they had a very good season, but they were bounced very quickly by the Buffalo Bills. Pretty much a passing of the torch for that division, basically saying, hey, Patriots, this is our division now. The only difference is with some of these other teams is the future does look bright for New England. Getting Mike Vrabel as a head coach is a fantastic add. Drake May seems like he's going to be the future. They very well may not end the decade as one of the worst teams, but so far they've been very, very bad. Back-to-back 4-win seasons. But I think they will be a lot better next season, and I do think they are on the come-up. So that's my top 5 for worst teams of the decade. You're probably thinking, Lampini, where are the Jaguars and the Giants? These two have the 2 worst losing percentages outside of the Panthers and Jets. The whole reason why they're not in the top 5 of worst teams is they both won playoff games. Ironically, both in 2022. The Jaguars showed a lot of promise in that 2022 season, winning a playoff game. Trevor Lawrence coming into his own. They had a very good run. Same with the Giants in 2022. They had a very good run there in the playoffs. They won a playoff game, and they looked really good. All it takes is one good playoff run versus some of these other teams. Like, if you look, by comparison, that 2022 season that the Jaguars and the Giants had, the Panthers have had nothing close to that. Neither have the Jets. Hell, the Bears have had nothing close to that. Like, they have a better win-loss percentage, the Bears, but they've had no season where they've shown any form of promise this decade on that level. The Jaguars and the Giants have been terrible. They've mismanaged their franchises. The Jaguars do have their franchise quarterback, but they're completely failing him, a la Matthew Stafford. They have their franchise quarterback, but they're completely failing him with roster construction and roster management. Just the franchise as a whole is failing him. I'm of the opinion that if Trevor Lawrence goes to a different team, he's going to do a lot better. And then the same goes for the Giants. They held on to Daniel Jones for too long, and now they're in a situation where they have Russell Wilson as their starter, and then Jackson Dart on the bench, who they're hoping to probably develop into their new guy. But I don't know how good Jackson Dart's going to be. So that concludes my review of the 2020 decade in the NFL so far. A lot of teams have done really well. A lot of teams have done very bad. Moral of the story, the Chiefs are number 1. The Eagles aren't too far behind. The Bills are the Chiefs' bitch. The Panthers and Jets are franchises in disarray. The Browns get in their way all the time. The Giants get in their way all the time. And the Washington Commanders have a new owner. They're about to build a new stadium. They have their franchise quarterback. And the future is bright. And DC Sports are back, baby. All right. So that concludes this video. Be on the lookout for some more videos down the line. I'm going to try to make some more off-season content before my 2025 predictions get started again. I've been Lampini, and I'll see you guys next time.